you guys from
Saturday we came.
So how many parents are there?
I heard you guys did that.
I mean, that's readable. That's okay. Talk amongst yourselves. Do a little light check. Yeah. This, I think, is doable. Okay. So are we all here? All the introducers, all the readers?
I'm the only introducer here.
Is that so? Yeah. Is that?
Let me call the rest of the introducers. I've written a speech for everyone.
Well then, okay, friends. A couple of the introducers are missing, but we found some undergraduates and said, sure. Hell yes. What are we talking about? No, they don't care. They don't even know what they're saying. Now that we have all the introducers. So, over there, could we have a little quiet? So, okay, dearest friends, here we are, the last one. In February, when Barbara announces that she has secured the solarium for our party. Getting the solarium in May is harder than getting the UVA chapel for a wedding in June. It has to be done. It's 1 minute past midnight. Barbara is up reserving. I'm only really a tiny bit kid. Anyway, so okay, when we hear that, we sort of think, well, here we are in February, it's cold, and we all have lots to do, and looking forward to me wearing my suit, the sun. It seems unlikely, and then it goes so fast, and then we're suddenly here, and gee, that really kind of didn't have to be quite that fast. And I know it's this way for our graduating MFAs, that 2 years spring by pretty fast. And I guess we all have to sort of glorify that, but with a small sniff. We know you're all leaving with something invaluable. Some kind of sense maybe that through some words you have some purchase on the sublime. Something small like that we're giving you. But we have, I have many thanks for us all to give, and this is the traditional part of the evening to give them. So, starting with our faculty, I won't name us all, or them all, but you know who they are, and they know who they are. And it's wonderful to have these people as colleagues and as mentors and teachers. So we applaud our faculty for them. A little gold star on that list goes to Deborah Nystrom, who stepped in last fall, who kept her thumb in the hole in the dike better than one can imagine. So thank you, Deborah. There's always a couple of people that do more for you and for us, than can possibly be imagined. And I often mention at least one of them, June Webb, who was our English department administrator, who simply tirelessly keeps things going at the department level for us. There's just no way, not to mention another person most of you have not heard of, although it would be fun for those of you staying to get to know Peter Baker. Peter Baker is a professor, a medievalist, kind of a rumpled-looking guy with a beard. He always looks, you can always find him at faculty meetings because he's fallen asleep in the corner. This has been a year, fortunately, that few of you know sort of what was going on, but in terms of minutiae of fellowships and GTAs, everything has everything to do with your lives. Peter Baker had the unlucky fate of standing in as the worst job in America, which is the associate chair of the English department at UVA, at exactly the wrong time. And he has done hundreds and hundreds of hours in the last 6 weeks. A close-run thing, as Wellington said about the Battle of Waterloo, a very close-run thing. So we just have to kind of take a moment and remember that people are making that sort of thing happen, and it's money in our pockets, and it's kindness, and it's real belief in all graduate students, but in such a gratifying way, it's real belief in this program as part of the English program. So Peter, we come to Jeb, who does almost as much as Peter does in the background, as you all well know. And we know how reliable he is and how creative he is in his thinking about pedagogy and about making sure you're ready to teach. That's something he's taken over. That's something he's getting noticed for throughout the college, really, his efforts on pedagogy. So we applaud Jeb. And finally, we applaud Barbara, our best friend, the most reliable of the reliables, who's, if anything works out in your administratively in your life, if in fact you end up taking the courses you think you were, if money that you thought you were going to get actually gets into your bank account, we all know the thing. So, thank you, Bob. And that is about it. I assume that the fiction writers are good on their alphabet, as good as the poets were, and that whoever's introducing the first person knows who he or she is. So, thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming out. So, the first time I really met Alex, we talked about what spirit animals the other would be. Now, for anyone unfamiliar with this question, it's a strangely personal one. You're essentially asking someone what shape your soul would take. And what that means is everyone wants to be a lion or a wolf, and not, say, like a shrew or a snail or a weevil. So I told her about a girlfriend who compared me to a house cat. And for that admission, she traded a self-effacing joke that people might call her a squirrel because of her voice. Then we came to a kind of an impasse. It was a question of whether or not we divined for each other an animal, but feeling a little shy, not knowing each other well enough at the time to make a sloppy guess and offend, we deferred. I've been thinking ever since then about what kind of animal Alex Shotwell would be. It strikes me as a strangely appropriate question. There's the flavor of the Old West in it, and a shifting of reality into something spectral and strange. While I'm not sure I have the right answer to the question, I'm sure of two things. One, she's not a squirrel. And two, I think it is the right question to have in mind when approaching the writing of Alex Shotwell. In lucid, clear prose, Alex's fiction combines the depth of myth with the shimmering surface of advertisement, blends the spirituality of the Old West with the spiritual bankruptcy of the New. In our last several workshops, we followed the growth of her novel, which began as a house full of rocks and an ex-map, and has opened a vast desert landscape, the search for and the retelling of the Old West. All of her fiction seems to embark on the search for this Eden and swallow the bitterness of its fruits. In her world, advertisements have replaced the myths, and ghosts wander housing developments, as lost in dreams of paradise as the living tenants inside them. In this way, she investigates a sadness for what we never had and now have instead. Her characters, caught between what the world offers and its disappointed delivery, like us, are at once idealistic and jaded, hapless and cunning, shakedown artists with queasy consciences. In her writing and her life, Alex displays a matter-of-factness with the world, a knowingness that people are generally less glorious than they think, but that they are still ultimately empathetic. Alex's world poses a question, whether the fantastic is an extension of the mundane, or the mundane an extension of the fantastic. Her work resides in the state of this uncertainty, offering no other answer except the wide silence after, like the silence of the mythic West. If it decides anything, it is that this space of silence has an insuperable hold on our desires to lose ourselves, to be changed, and to be remade. Alex's worth achieves a strange aftermath feeling, one of having seen the world, being stripped of illusions, and finding peace. Her ghosts shrug at immortality. There is nothing so falsely elevated in her work as final redemption, and there is nothing falsely elevated in Alex. Dude, she says. And I take that as a pronouncement on the world, a philosophy, and a word that implies the unseriousness, the rather tenuous cosmic position of speaker and spoken to, and yet a brotherhood within it. So, dude, we'll miss you when you go home. Come on up and read.
This is like the eternal struggle up here. This microphone. Right. Thanks, dude. Yeah, still have not found my spirit animal, but not really looking that hard, I guess. How does one look for a spirit animal anyway? Alright, so before I get ready and do this, I have been chosen as a mouthpiece because I went first for all of the second-year fictionaires, just to say a big thanks to all the MFA professors who are all here, especially to Jane and Chris and John, who are actually present, for teaching us this past year and, caring for us and making us write better even when we didn't like it. Also to Ann Beatty and Scott Spencer, who aren't actually here right now, but who led our workshops last year, and taught us a lot, and were really incredible, and who we miss. A big thanks to Jeb, who I think there was a period last semester when I was in his office at least twice a week with some sort of question about how do you teach, or what do I do now, or like, my God, what is my life turning into? Can you please fix this for me? To the poets, who did a wonderful job last night, and so now we have to live up to that. Thanks. Definitely to Barbara, who is the patron saint of the MFA program, and who puts up with so much nonsense from us. Like, if you're not in the program, you have no idea what this woman goes through on a daily basis from a bunch of writers who just can't get their shit together. She gets us the coffee and cookies every Monday. That's the greatest, right? And finally, to all of you, the general crowd, because I got to spend 2 wonderful years in this great community, just spending my time writing and reading and talking about writing and talking about reading. And it's been really great, and I made a bunch of friends, and you're all super cool dudes. So, thanks for that, everybody. All right. So I'm actually going to read the first half of the story, and it's not about the West. Sorry. And I don't like to choose favorites in general. It seems somehow untoward. But this is definitely my favorite story to read. I don't know if it's my favorite overall, but it's real fun. I'm just gonna keep messing with this microphone for the next as long. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, this is called Alligator Girls. An empty beer can hit the water with a light splash, a couple feet from the alligator snout it was aimed at. Christy raised her head off the dock. "What did you do that for?" she said. "You won't do nothing," said Derek. "Asshole," said Brina. She didn't bother opening her eyes. The girls lounged on a wooden dock that stretched 10 feet out over the swamp, lying on their backs with their heads together. The sunlight was cut through by the thick, sinewy trees, and periodically they'd inch themselves along the dock to follow it. They wore bikini tops untied and loose around their necks, triangles over their breasts. "It's just old Bill," said Derek. "He's gonna bite your leg off one of these days," said Christy. She adjusted the triangles of her top and laid her head back on the dock. "He won't," said Derek. He tugged another Bud Light from the rings of a six-pack he was carrying, cracked it open and gulped. "Come on and get me, jackass," he shouted to the alligator. Old Bill did nothing. "Keep up like that and I won't even call an ambulance when he does," said Brina. She still hadn't opened her eyes. "Christy will call for me," Derek said. "Won't you, Christy?" "I might," said Christy, just to get him to shut up. He only bothered the alligator when he was drunk, but even sober, she didn't like him. Next to his bed, there was a bottle of Frisia-scented Walmart lotion, and he liked to stick his hands under Christy's nose and ask if he smelled pretty. When Christy was younger, she said yes, just to get him out of her face. But when she got older, she identified the second smell, musky and bleachy underneath the perfume, and started telling him to fuck off. He always just laughed. Since he was Brina's older brother, she never said anything, just avoided him as best she could. It was easier when he had work, but work was slow these days, and now he'd come and found her and Brina when they were just trying to work on their cans. "Come over here, you old bastard," Derek shouted. Christy wondered how many beers he'd had before he found them. The six-pack he was carrying around by his rings still had one left, but he was more than 5 years drunk. She'd seen him put back 14 beers at a go before. Brina raised her arms in front of her face and examined them, poking at her skin with one finger. "I never can tell when I'm about to burn," she said. "I brought my aloe over," said Christy, "and the party's not for 2 days. It'll be fine as long as you don't peel." Brina lifted her head and tied the strings behind her neck, then sat up slowly, hands holding the triangles of her top in place, glancing over her shoulder at her brother. She tied the bottom around her ribcage and knelt on the dock, watching Derek. He found a long branch and was holding it in his right hand, splashing at the water in front of the alligator. The other still held the beer. He whistled at old Bill like he was a dog, and the alligator sank out of sight below the surface of the muddy water, with only a ripple to mark where his snout had been. Derek looked over at the dock and then away. "Maybe he'll pass out soon," said Christy. "Last time we left him passed out, he didn't hear the end of it," said Brina. "There's no proof we were here," Christy said, eyes so closed against the sun. Brina sighed. "I'll tell Daddy his loss." She assessed the sunlight on the dock and lowered herself onto her front, sweeping her hair out to one side, face still toward Christy. "Can he come in Friday?" Christy asked her. "I think so," Brina said. She reached awkwardly behind her back for her bikini ties. "He and Teresa broke up. He's visiting his." "He's always throwing off that condom in his wallet," Christy agreed. Squinting, she reached over and yanked on Brina's ties for her, flopping the strings away from her back so she wouldn't get lines. "Do you think there's really a baby?" "She got out of gym class," Brina said. "Peterson will let you out of gym class for whispering the word period in the same room as him," Christy said. "When's she due?" "December. Her face is puffier and she's always going on about morning sickness," Brina said. "That ain't proof," Christy said. No one really understood what Kenny had seen in Teresa. Brina in particular didn't understand. Kenny was on the football team, his daddy owned the Ford dealership in town, and his house had 3 bathrooms. Teresa wore all her clothes a size too tight, dyed her hair an uneven blonde, and wore a combination of thick black eyeliner and frosted blue eyeshadow. Rumor had it she'd once had to get her stomach pumped after giving the entire basketball team blowjobs in the boys' locker room. Christy imagined her kneeling on the ugly tile floor, fully clothed or maybe topless, all the boys standing in a line in front of her, waiting politely, shuffling forward when the first one finished. Boys had never lined up for Christy. That baby could be anybody's, she said. She turned her head to check on Derek, but he was fully absorbed in taunting the alligator, drawing drunken shapes on the surface of the water with his stick. So she did the same moves as Brina. Strings around the neck, sit up, strings around the torso. She was fully tied before Derek looked up at her. Brina's eyes were closed, so Christy flipped him off before lying back down on her stomach. Brina reached over and did her strings for her, brushed her hair up her back. Tell me if I start to burn, Christy said. You're good, Brina said. No tan lines even. Overhead, a thick breeze stirred the tree branches, and the light on the dock and the swamp shifted. Brina and Christy didn't move, and the shadows played over their backs. Charlie's coming, Brina said. Charles, said Christy, and both girls giggled. Charlie Tuning had gone up to Georgia Tech this past year, and had come home taking himself too seriously, but he was still a prize. Light brown hair and light blue eyes, easy and charming. Last year, at a bonfire, he draped his leather jacket over Christy's shoulders and said she looked cold. He could probably get any college girl he wanted, and if she was going to compete with college girls, Christy didn't need sunburn or tan lines. The girls heard a loud splash and popped their heads out, chests still firmly on the dock. Derek was doubled over laughing, holding a thick branch 2 feet long. You missed, you dumb shit, he said to the alligator, who had surfaced 5 or 6 feet from the shore. Derek waved the stick at the beast again. Come on, get it! Edville disappeared. Quit harassing that poor animal, Christy shouted. He ain't done anything to you. Come on over here and bait me, Derek shouted back. He threw the stick at the spot where the alligator had disappeared, but Bill didn't appear. Derek looked for another stick. I hope he bites your arm off, Christy said, and threw her head back down. You don't want his arm bitten off, said Brina. He'd be even more useless than he is now. He's no use to me, said Christy. I gotta take a piss, Derek announced. He cracked the last beer, tossed the plastic rings into the swamp, and strode into the trees. Christy and Brina didn't look up. They gave him the Camaro, Brina said once he was gone. That's yours, said Christy. You just got it running again. He didn't even have a license since the DUI, Brina said. Her eyes were still shut. He's driving it just for now, Daddy said, until he gets back on his feet and gets his own car. It's okay. It's a shitty car. Christy snorted. It's your shitty car. Maybe Bill will take a foot, Brina said. They heard a deep crack in the woods, and then Derek crashed back through the trees, pants buttoned and fly unzipped. The girls looked up. He held an entire tree limb in both hands. Still green where he ripped it from the trunk. God damn it, said Brina. I wish she would let us all alone for once. Christy glared at Derek, who wasn't looking at her. She thought about Bill getting 1 foot and dragging him under, Derek thrashing in the muddy swamp water. We could put sugar in the gas tank, she said. I know you want this, coaxed Derek, poking at the water with the enormous branch, swaying from side to side. Come on, I got you the stick. That's not worth it, Green said. The girls heard a thump and a splash and felt the warm droplets of swamp water on their backs, but they didn't bother looking up until the screaming started. The sound jerked their heads up like there were strings attached. Derek was still standing at the water's edge, his left hand holding a foot of tree branch, and the stump of his right wrist pumping blood into the swamp. He stood still, staring at the blood, screaming. Oh God, said Brina. Oh my God. Oh Jesus. She didn't move. Christy jumped to her feet and yanked at Brina's arm. Get up, she said. And when Brina didn't, he shouted, get up! Until she stood as well, eyes unfocused and unsteady, just repeating, oh God, oh God. Derek kept on screaming wordlessly, holding that stick in one hand, staring at where the other had been. Shut up! Christy shouted into Brina's face and shook her. Go get help! She could see the whites of Brina's eyes around the irises. Go! She shouted, and turned the other girl toward the end of the dock. Brina finally obeyed, running into the trees toward her house, wearing just her bikini bottom. Jesus fucking Christ, holy shit, my hand, it got my hand! Derek was shouting. Christy grabbed both bikini tops from where they lay abandoned on the dock and ran to where Derek was standing by the water, his face had gone pale. Get away from there, she shouted. He stopped screaming for a moment, and she grabbed his left arm. He stumbled backwards and fell, and that started him screaming again, so she took him by the shoulders and pulled him far enough from the water that she judged the gator couldn't get to him. Blood still spurted from his wrist, jetting up with every beat of his heart, and his arm bones stuck out. Flesh hung off the stump and bloody strings. She was sure Bill smelled the blood in the water, and that he'd be back to the rest of Derek just as soon as he finished stringing up that hand. He bit my hand off! Derek was screaming again. Shut up! Shouted Christy, and to her surprise, he did. She knelt next to him and grabbed his right arm by the elbow. It was slippery with blood, but she positioned it across her knees, spraying blood all over herself, and she tied both bikini tops around his forearm as tight as she could and held Derek's arm over her knees, stumped in the air, hoping that the blood would stop pumping out so fast. She was surprised at how clear everything seemed. She wasn't even dizzy or nauseous, even though she could see his bones and the metallic smell of his blood surrounded her. "Come on," she said to him, something she'd heard on TV shows about emergency rooms. "Stay with me." Derek was breathing fast, shallow little breaths in and out, and his face was the color of concrete. Christy's entire front was smeared with his blood, from her hair to her toes, and for a second she thought she caught a whiff of freesia through its heavy stench. "You're gonna make it," she said. "You've got real nice titties," he said, and then passed out. Christy knelt next to Derek for the better part of 10 minutes, holding his stump in the air above his heart, 2 bikini tops cinched around his forearm. Besides keeping his stump elevated, there really wasn't much to do. She supposed that if Brina never came back with help, she'd have to go find it herself and leave Derek. But Brina had lived here all her life and could get home from this dock blindfolded. Derek's blood got sticky where it started to dry in her front. In spots, it started to turn brown and flake off. Sometimes Derek twitched or seemed like he was waking up. Sometimes the water rippled, and she worried that Bill was coming back. She'd have no choice but to run off and let him finish the job on Derek. But overall, Christy's only task was to sit and wait. Finally, Brina came crashing back through the trees, wearing a stained white undershirt, her face blotchy red and covered in smeared tears. Her father, her uncle, and the neighbor boy were with her, the neighbor boy shirtless. As soon as he saw her, Brina's uncle took off his shirt and handed it silently to Christy, looking at the ground. He and her father looked at Derek, still keeping his stump elevated, and the neighbor boy hung back a little with Brina, one hand on her back. "Peter still got his hand?" he asked. Christy nodded. The 3 of them followed her father and uncle back to the house, where Brina's uncle drove to the hospital, and the neighbor boy rode a shotgun, and Brina's father stayed in the back of the pickup with his son. Brina pulled on jean shorts and flip-flops, and she and her mother followed in the Camaro. Christy stayed at their house alone to shower off the blood. Before she got in, she took a minute. The uncle's shirt and her bikini bottoms were both ruined, and she took them off and tossed them onto the linoleum bathroom floor, then looked at herself, naked and bloody, in the mirror. She looked sexy, she thought with a shock. Maybe not sexy, that was weird. But she looked fierce and terrible. She looked like somebody who could take care of shit. Her eyes looked bluer with blood streaked across her face, she thought. Her breasts looked bigger, spattered red. She put both hands on her hips and turned to look over her shoulder so that one nipple had just peeked in front of her arm in the mirror. Out of habit, she thought about Charlie again, but he seemed distant, unimportant. She thought about standing in front of a line of boys, looking them in the eye, all waiting patiently. She just missed the line. She'd seen him in. She trailed a finger down her front, following a blood drop in a split line from the hollow of her throat to her belly button. Her nipples puckered and she shivered. The tiny bathroom was close with the smell of blood. Christy shook her head and started the water running in the shower. Thanks.
Is this okay? Everyone's gonna ask. Okay. Emma Eisenberg is one of the most generous people I have ever met. The following is a partial list of the things she has given us over the past year. 1. The 3 N's. Man! And, most importantly, muffin. 2. A warmer welcome than any of we 5 newly relocated, nervous first years could have possibly expected. Emma made it her business to put us at ease, to make us feel at home, both in the early days of the school year and every day thereafter. 3. Insightful support and brilliant suggestions for everyone else's work, in which she is wholly invested, in which she believes. 4. The most glorious description of a tattoo that I have ever read. 5. The feels. Oh, the feels. Emma has them, and she hands them out, on so many occasions, both with the wonderful things she writes and with her many everyday kindnesses. 6, characters who want and think and care and breathe and live and scramble up off the page to make their own feelings known, to plant their flags on your brain. 7, in fact, story after story that brims with these real people on their strange paths, told with wisdom and cleverness and beautiful sentence craft. Story after story that gets at the truth of things. Writing that communicates not only mind to mind, but heart to heart, which is one of the most difficult and necessary things for writing to do. And now, about to add to the list of beautiful things she has given us, I am honored to present Eliza.
Thank you so much, Emily.
A little shorter than everybody else, so very good. Yeah, I just want to second what Alex said so well, and just say thank you especially to Chris and to Jane Allison, my thesis committee, and also to say thank you to my fellow graduating fiction years. Being readers and friends and writers with you all has been one of the big pleasures of my life, so thank you. Okay. I wanted to read a story and be able to say this has neither lesbians nor West Virginia in it. However, we are who we are, so that's not going to happen. However, so I'm going to read the beginning of the story and then skip ahead to the middle because I don't have such nice lean stories as some of you. And maybe the only friends to know are the narrator, Tracy, is a bartender. And the story's moment is the 30th birthday party of her best friend and roommate, who is named Gin, like the alcohol, G-I-N. Gin has also just gotten a new girlfriend named Rachel, and that makes Tracy feel some feelings. Hopefully everything else is clear. Okay. It's okay, I'm gonna ask you. Okay, very good. At Ray's birthday bar, we specialize in birthdays. A free shot for you if you can show me a driver's license that proves it's your day. 2 free ones if the address on said license is South Philadelphia. And if you're a lifer with 10 years or more of loyal patronage, the number's 3, and we'll turn on the disco ball. I read somewhere that you have to get 23 people in the same room before there is a 50% chance that 2 of them will have the same birthday. Here, the odds are much better. It's Sunday, early, and no one is at the bar for Gin's party yet, except me and the lifers and Ray, the owner. There was my 40th when it hailed, and Ray bought us pizza, Wade says. He wipes a hand across his new neck tattoo of bleeding thorns, and a little real blood comes away on his palm. That was my favorite birthday, Wade says, and nods at me when I set his glass down full again. The bell on Ray's door clanks, and a birthday boy with a ponytail comes in and sits at the disco ball end of the bar. He downs his free shot of the gin beam and slides a $5 across to me. Take one for yourself, he says. I shrug and do like the man says, and it makes Gin's party ride a little lighter, knowing I have a date at the end of it if I want. So, skipping ahead. My favorite birthday is not my own, Ray says. 10 years ago today. This girl. He puts an arm low around my waist where my jeans begin, and smacks his marble menthol light lips against the side of my face. What happened 10 years ago? Tex wants to know. He rolls up his sleeves. Sorry, that's the guy that came. Tex. Tex wants to know. He rolls up his sleeves to the elbow. Already, he wants all our stories. On the same day, what are the odds that moron Gin and Tracy both come into my bar, says Ray. Tracy, fresh off the bus from Camden. She didn't even smoke this one. I did so smoke, I say. You did not so, Ray says. All right, I say, and light a cigarette as if to make up for the past. But you had that sign. I'd been pounding pavement for 3 weeks after getting fired from my job in Camden, sponge bathing a disabled girl named Serena. We'd done crossword puzzles and I'd lent her a plaid skirt so we could match as we danced to Madonna. But then her brother had gotten out of the Marines and been hot, so that ended. But Serena had called me pretty girl, as in, hey, hey, pretty girl, more apple juice. So when I saw the sign in the window of Ray's birthday bar that said, pretty girl bartender wanted, I guessed it was divine intervention. That's when I was married, thank Jesus the Son of God no more, to what's-her-name, Ray says. That sign was her idea. But anyway, Tracy walks in the bar. She is wearing this ugly coat made of sheep's, but she is very beautiful. But she says she doesn't smoke, so what's-her-name doesn't want to hire her. After all, then, now, Ray's is a smoking bar. Praise the Lord, says Wade. Never will I cave to the city, Ray says. Here, we sit inside like human beings. Anyway, Tracy is about to leave when the door opens, and in comes this kid, definitely underage, so skinny. I picture Jin as she was then. Jeans hanging off for lack of an ass, her hair short as a man on the sides, but long on top. She carried a green tube-shaped rucksack, swung jauntily over her shoulder, like she was the first little pig off to make her fortune. So, Ray says, she orders a beer. I look at her license. She does not even try to present false identification, but the date says it is her birthday. What came over me? I do not know. I gave this gin a shot of Jaeger. Free, I said, because it is your birthday, and because I have this beautiful woman at my bar, but only because. Do not be coming back in here again, I said. And then Tracy said, is that your golden rule? Is that why you are called Ray's Birthday Bar? I said, that is just the concept, which every bar should have. Happy is the concept. What does birthday mean if it does not mean happy? But it occurs. I think for a second. That is not bad. One free shot. Who can have just one? So Ray's birthday rules are born. And I hire this Tracy on the spot, even though she will not smoke and is soon pregnant as a pumpkin. That sinks into the air for a second. You have a kid, Wade says. There goes my fantasy. His name is Jake, Ray says. One time, we drive by his house in Lansdale. All right, I say. Ray gives me the teeth grimace he makes when his ex-wife comes around the bar, wanting to know why she's still getting his cable bill in the mail. Correction, I say. Had. That's what nice Catholic adoptions are for. What about you, Tracy? Tex says. What was your favorite birthday? Nice try, I say. The bar is filling up. I do a couple of other birthday freebies. A barrel-shaped woman with pigtails is waving her license at me from the middle of a pack of roller derby girls and a men's hockey team whose boy leans so far over the bar in my direction that I have to stand back by their microwave to pour his shot. Jin's employees from the seafood restaurant start to show up, and for them I do mostly Sunday night specials. Where's Jin? Jin's gay boy assistant manager asks, washing his Jaeger down with a swig of PBR. She'll be here, I say. Your hair's different, he says. It's purple. Very astute, I say. On a whim this afternoon, before work, Jin and I decided to dye a streak of my hair, so out Jin went to ShopRite. I was in my bathroom, putting on my face, when I heard her running up my stairs with the plastic bags. She mixed the bleach as I did my eyeshadow and lipstick. While the purple seeped in, I sat on the tile in a towel, and she sat in the doorway, and we watched movie trailers about the end of the world. This is nice, Jin said. We haven't done this in forever. You got a girlfriend, I said. I did, she said. But even before that, even then, we didn't. Summertime is hibernating time, I said. My room is the only place in the house that's cool. She smiled. My birthday, she began. It brings Jake with it. You're thinking about him. So what, I said. So I think about him. Every year on my birthday, we do the same thing, Jim said. I make you breakfast and get Jake's address in Lansdale out from the door with the Chinese menus and put it by your breakfast plate. And then I put it away after you've looked at it for a while. And then we walk down the block to get ice cream at the custard shack but end up drunk at Ray's. I know, I said. It's magical. Your point? We could do something else, she said. Why? I said, and turned on the shower. Ray's bell clanks, and then Jin is in the bar. Jin's hair is slicked down, and she wears suspenders and a checkered button-up that pulls apart to show the too-tight sports bra she uses to strap down her breasts. I have often said that Jin would be the perfect guy if she were not the woman. My, I said, aren't we looking handsome? The bell clanks again behind Rachel. Jin takes Rachel's tiny hand and pulls Rachel up to sit on the stool beside her. Rachel is actually miniature, a candidate for legal midgetry. Rachel's long curly hair is up in a ponytail. It's so dark it's almost black like mine, but too shiny to be dyed. She wears a purple cotton dress and no makeup. Madam, Jin says, 2 of your finest shots of alcohol. Actually, it's 3, I say. You're a lifer now, Ray, if you please. Ray pulls the string. The disco ball is the size of an apple, and it spins slowly, casting little dots on the cigarette machine near the bathroom and on Tex's face. He has a face like a friend. I put the shots in front of Jin. You better not try to come back in here and get 3 tomorrow, I say. I know you. I know who you are. Oh, get a room, Wade says, ha-haing. Hey, Jin, I say, for old time's sake, and because Tex hasn't heard this one either. Remember your 26th birthday? Jin sits very still. Nope, she says, and it's true, she doesn't. Rachel takes her hair down from its ponytail, then gathers it back up again. We were sloshed, Jin says. That's putting it extremely mildly, I say. On Jin's 26th, there was a piñata in the shape of a pair of oversized breasts and a kissing competition that had Jin pressed up against Ray's whipped cream mouth. Jin was between, and, obliging girl that I am, I didn't want her to go without on her birthday. In the morning, I woke up in my bra and thought and though the towels on my windows were keeping the light out, I could feel the heat of the new day. Jin kissed and kissed the side of my face like a dog. Wake up, Jin said, jumping out of bed and yanking the towels to the floor. You'll sleep your life away. Tex keeps buying me drinks. I keep buying Jin drinks, and Jin keeps buying Rachel drinks. Rachel is slow, and Jin helps her finish. Rachel keeps taking at the inside of her wrist and wiping it across her eyes. It's true that the air tonight is especially smoky. I blame the roller derby girls. Hey, I say when Jin walks by the cigarette machine, buy me a pack? I told you I quit, she says, and then I know it's serious. As long as I have known her, Jin has been a world-class smoker. I didn't see Jin for 6 months after that day we met at Ray's, and then she just showed up at the bar again, a pack rolled in the sleeve of her white t-shirt, James Dean style. Ray told you not to come back in here, I said. I know, she said, but I just moved to Philadelphia for good, and I remembered this bar. She smiled through her bangs. Show me around? We crossed the triangle intersection where the vinyl sign on the chain-link fence says, looking for good people, may have bad credit, and the row of white iron gates on Tremaine that all have 3 paces worth of patchy grass and the same squat white front doors, and porcelain Jesus and the Madonna figurines in their yards. We stood in front of DeFalco and Sons' funeral parlor, where a heart-shaped flower arrangement was losing its blue and white carnations into the street. Who dies here, do you think? Jin said. Us, probably, I said, and headed off towards the line at Pat's. Girl can eat, Jin said, once I got in my 2 cheesesteaks and we were sitting at one of the red metal tables on the street. You know, I said, I am eating for 2, as they say. Oh, Jin said. Oh, wow, she said. So there's that, I said, but lucky for this man child, I have selected a wholesome Catholic couple from the internet. Jin said, can I see? I laughed. You want to see Vince and Courtney, college-educated, loving Catholics, but sorry, no, absolutely no birth contact allowed. Jin put down her steak and thought about it. Yes, she said. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. Jin's assistant manager climbs into the bar's only booth and sets up a kind of DJ station with some speakers in his phone. He puts on a song and raises his hands above his head, and soon the roller derby girls and Jin's employees are dancing too. Go on and have fun, Ray says to me, and he takes over the bar. When Jin comes out of the bathroom, right away she wants to know where Rachel is. Who knows? She could be anywhere, I say, and hunch down like a munchkin. That's not funny, Jin says. It's a little bit funny, I say, and turn back to Ray. Another shot for my tall friend. No, Jin says, I shouldn't. Rachel's leaving for a conference tomorrow and she'll be gone all week. What is alcohol for if not for sex, I say. Jin gives me a look then, a look like the delivery man from Soupland gives me when I pay him in all $1 bills. That's what I used to think too, Jin says. Then Jin spots Rachel coming through the door and goes to her. They dance to a slow song, Jin's hands. They are big and good, and all the same thickness, even through the knuckles. Jin's hands start out at the back of Rachel's neck, where there are dark, curly baby hairs underneath her ponytail, and then they wipe across Rachel's bare shoulders and down her hairy arms, until they are gripping her wrists and pulling them in to rest against the crisp material of Jin's shirt, where her chest is flat like a man's above her breasts. They dance slow, the slowest kind of dance you've ever seen. I turn to Jin's assistant manager, who is scrolling powerfully through his phone. Hey man, I say, can't you give us something with a beat? He pinches his lips, but does like I say, putting on something faster and newer. Rachel and Jin step back from each other, and everyone who is too embarrassed to slow dance jumps back out onto the floor. Here we go, I say, and pull Tex up from his stool, and we get wild. I stomp on the floor with the heels of my boots, and Tex hooks his thumbs into my belt loops and lifts me up. But when I turn around, Jin is dancing behind me, and Rachel is nowhere, and Jin and I jump up and down, hitting the balloons that float near the bar's low ceiling. I lean into Jin then, only a little, so it's just the edges of our clothing touching. I light a cigarette and hand it to Jin. She looks at it in between her fingers and takes a small puff and then a long drag. I hold the cigarette above the crowd, and Jin and I press our foreheads into each other as we jump, her sweat-slicked forehead to my foundation-gunked one. When I was pushing Jake out of my vagina, the only person there in the room with me, besides this old nurse, who wore white plastic shoes that looked like duck feet, was Jin. Jin had a job, and she had promised to do it. I don't want to see him, I told her. I don't want to hear him. Jin is so tall that she had to kneel on the ground to hold my hand in both of hers. This nurse in the duck feet counted 1, 2, 1, 2, and said things like, "You can do it, you're almost there," like they do in the movies, but I couldn't, and I wasn't. "Hell of a way to spend your birthday," I said to Jin between the pain, but she just nodded and held me better. The blood and the shit rushed out of me then, and I felt the good thing that had been happening in my body that year rush out of me too. And I realized then that I'd forgotten to tell Jin that I didn't want to smell him either, because if anyone brought him within 3 feet of my nose, I would smell what it is like all the way up in my body where there is no sin record, where no one ever has been or ever will go. And so when the nurse made for me, in her white duck feet, with my son in her arms, Jin put her eyeballs against my eyeballs. And I thought then that this was the closest Jin will ever get to knowing what it is like to look into the eyes of the person you love as they are fucking you. And I screamed, and I didn't stop screaming until Jin had explained to the nurse, and the nurse had finally gotten it through her skull, that I was just a dumb whore and no one's mother. Jin did her job. I screamed and I turned away, but I smelled him anyway. That was my favorite birthday.
Oninya. Her name, which I was first explained, is meant to be spoken as if in a song. I don't sing very well, but if I had to put to music, I think I would choose something slow, something smooth, whose range would stand along the limits of the bass clef, and in place of crescendos, there would be long, drawn-out silences, punctuated by a sudden offbeat, "Oh no." As anyone who knows her would attest, Oninya has a presence. When she speaks, her voice is known to part those voices around her, as if they were the Red Sea. Her fiction is tied to the rhythm, the voices, and soul of her home, Nigeria. Her characters treat their trauma, the freak occurrences that spot their lives, with a casual indifference. They adapt and they survive. Their pleasures are few and their hardships many. Oninya has a gift for making a tragic ending simultaneously redemptive. As Raph once said, no one does corrupt government officials like Oninya. She's an actress, and her love of the spoken word and its meter is indelibly apparent in her work. It begs to be read aloud, but not just by anyone. Hearing her read, it's as if she snuck into a hidden corner before her reading, crumpled her stories into neat little bundles, and breathed the life into them that only she could access. Because they live and breathe and are full of the same grace that she is. So, it is my great pleasure to introduce Oninya Hizeku.
Thank you, Ryan. I didn't know I was that interesting. Sorry, just a little water. Thank you. All right. Yes. So I really don't want to repeat what Alex has said when she actually stepped out here, but then I think it's going to be quite impossible for me to actually give this reading and not say how I'm really very grateful and really very happy to be here. It's been an experience for me, coming to America for the first time from my country and meeting wonderful, wonderful people. I mean, people who were really ready to give me so much, and I really didn't know why. So it's been a wonderful experience, and it's something that I wouldn't really exchange for anything else. So thank you so much. Okay, so the story I'm going to be reading, I actually chose it because it's about one of the shortest I have, and it's just about 8 pages. It's actually titled Nkori, so that in my language means conversation. And it's actually about a conversation between a young woman and her mother. The young woman is in America, of course. And, so her name is Sonto, and so in the course of this narrative, you will be hearing lots of other names. So I just want to warn you beforehand, before you actually lose your attention. So her name is Sonto, and her brother's name is Ugo. And I think other names will be coming up, but Sonto and Ugo. And then her auntie's name is Rosa. All right, so ready? Nkori. Sonto's mother was saying, and another thing I haven't yet told you, Benedicta and her husband had their wedding yesterday. Big music band came. Wedding? Sonto asked. But they're already married. In the church I'm meeting, the mother said. Is that? They're doing just like you and Papa. Mama said. But me and your father had a small wedding. Benedicta's own was big like this. Seafood, see big cake, see balloons. And the music band had 2 big drums, even dancers in skirts and t-shirts. There were 3 different types of rice to eat. I sat quietly in the corner. I was looking. I was saying to myself, what does an old couple need this for? Their mother, their children are all grown up now, Mama. Let them spend their money. What money? Mama said. They have money and they are renting an apartment above my room. Huh. But everyone wants a big wedding these days, Mama. So we see, Mama said. Then it was not so. When I was young, all that was needed was to pay the bride price and drink the palm wine over a woman's head. But now, everyone says we have to marry in the church or we won't see Jesus. Which, Sonto said, has confused both us and Jesus because Jesus isn't familiar with our ways. Mama sighed. Don't make it look like Jesus is just an ordinary human being. He was born and he died, Sonto said. Ha! The mother cried. Is this now what comes out of being in America? Sonto said, don't start, Mama. I'm not starting anything. You're the one starting something. So, to unstart things and return their phone conversation to a theme mother and daughter could mutually appreciate, Sonto told her mother of the pet frog she was tending for an out-of-town neighbor. It was 18 years old, chubby, and the color of fluted pumpkin. The frog's name was Champ. Frog, Mama said. What's someone doing with a frog? It's a pet, like a dog. Mama started laughing. These people are suffering from their full stomachs. There's nothing I won't hear. Can a frog know who owns it? Of all the things in the world. Sonto said, well, I just feed it. Feed it what? Mama said. Crickets, worms. Mama said. Just make sure you wash your hands. Frogs, God deliver us. Let me sell them the ones in my backyard as well. Do the frogs wear socks and shoes too? Or a big man's coat? Both women laughed and laughed. A picture of the lush garden in the backyard at home was now before Sonto's eyes, spread out like a painted canvas. It was a layout of spinach mostly, structured in rows like school children at a general assembly. Around the edges of the leafy assembly stood gangly basil shrubs, a few tomatoes, okra, and pepper, what, as she had now learnt in American food markets, went by the name of habanero chili. During the dry season, it was her brother, Ugo, who had the task of watering the plants with water from the rainwater barrel. Then the tomatoes would wither for no reason at all, and the okras would grow so tall they had to be uprooted. Okra was not to grow taller than its owner. It was a local proverb, really, not Mama who had invented it. It meant that one was never to usurp the authority of elders. And Mama told this first to the Oprah and then to Ugo and Sonto 7 days a week, 365 days every immoral teenage year. Now, Mama was saying in Sonto's ears, your auntie Rosa is building a house in the village with upstairs and swimming pool too. Auntie Rosa, Sonto asked, that woman, the things she does, Mama said. Why not build an ordinary house? That swimming pool of hers will chase the men away. Auntie Rosa will marry when the time is right, Sonto said. Aha! At 40 going on 50 something and something? And she's still a baby. When I was newly married, your Auntie Rosa was old enough to receive her own suitors. Now see, still single. Let her go on. Let her go on building swimming pools instead of praying for a husband. The other day, when she came to greet your father, I spotted 2 grey hairs behind her ear, very close to her neck. But I just looked away. I didn't want to point it out to her before she says I am the cause of her problems. Mama, what is true? Sonto's mama stopped. The line went dead. Then a hiss. Sonto said, Mama, are you there? Hello? Hello? I can hear you, I can hear you. Hello? Hello? Oh, Sonto, oh! What happened? I was just talking to myself. Must be network. Yes, yes, yes. I was saying, do you know what your father said when he learned that your Auntie Rosa was building a house? What did Papa say? He said, fuck up. Sonto shot forward in her chair. There was a splatter of rain outside. She remembered the washing on the line and got to her feet. She slipped on her flip-flops and paused a moment. She blinked at the red petals and then, these were not the flip-flops she expected to see. Not the blue styrofoam pair with white stripes around the instep. Then she recalled why it wasn't the blue pair. This was not her room in Lagos, but her studio apartment in America. She leaned on the door and looked around her. Chum, the frog, caught in his tie. There were no clothes outside. Now Sonto leaned back in her chair. Papa said, fuck up. Mama said. Your father has learned a new word in his old age. I told him not to say that thing around me, but you just said it yourself, Mama. I was only saying what your father said. Well then, what's that got to do with Auntie Rosa's house? Of course he's angry that his younger sister has built a house and he hasn't. Now it has dawned on him what I was saying all those years about us buying land. Today he's retired, no money for anything except fuck up. And you just said it, Mama. Sorry, my dear. And they could hear the amusement in one another's voices. It was thin, almost crackly. Both women were silent at the ends of the line. Then it rose like the beginning vapors of fresh, burning wood. Her mother's labored breathing came at Sonto before the words. All the bad things he has done, your father, all the bad things he has done, that man. Mama, don't start, please. All the bad things, Mama said. And now he can't even afford a house of her own. All those women he carried, spending money on them, Mama. And I am the one he turns to in old age, drunk all the time, no house, no nothing, and I have to be the good wife. Mama, why will I not have a big wedding? Mama said. Why will I not have a big wedding like Benedicta? Why will I not have a person to drive me around in a car? But I jump from taxi to taxi. I walk with these knees. My arthritis is killing me. Mama, I promise, after my school, I will come back. Don't come back. There are no good men here. Look at your brother, Ugo. The last time your auntie visited from Lagos, she told us that the same old woman is pregnant with Ugo's second child. A harlot old enough to be his mother. I hear he has renovated her parlor, bought her a car, and moved into a bigger apartment with her. Is this how God is rewarding me for being a good mother? When did Auntie Rosa tell you this? Sonto asked her mother. The week that just went. Today is Sunday. Was it Friday? Was it Saturday? No, I can't say the day exactly. Mama, your brother is just like his father. No sense for anything except wild women who have not been caught. They are the women who have no self-control and chase after men. Sonto's room was getting cold from the rain. She walked over to the heater and turned the knob. The wall panels began to hum. Her mother was saying, "But I know you're not that way. You will not bring me shame because you're able to control yourself. If you weren't caught, maybe I would have had my doubts." Sonto was by the wall. The heat from a panel spread about her ankles. She said, "What are you saying, Mama?" "Sonto, call your brother. Call Ugo. Ask him, what have I done to him?" "I was caught. When?" There was a pause at both ends. Then her mother said, "When you were a baby." There was another pause. Her mother said, "Why do you sound like that?" Again, Sonto looked around her room. The droning from the fridge, the humming from the panels, and the pattering of the rain outside all receded into the deep. And she heard voices in the distance, voices from the two men she'd been with in her 28 years of living. First was her former boss at the water bottling plant back in Lagos. He had asked her after the first time, "What's wrong with your room?" Which was a question she had misunderstood to be on laden pins. And then there was more recently Taylor, who owned Champ the Frog. On the evening Taylor had brought Champ over with a token check of $100 propped on the tank, Taylor had hugged Sonto in gratitude. Then he ran his hand through her heavy afro, lowered her to the bed. At the door, as Sonto was saying goodnight and wishing him a safe trip, Taylor's blue eyes glinted a sharp purple. He'd never been with a black woman before. He said, "You do kind of look different down there. I'm not talking of the coloration and stuff, just the part, you know." And he shrugged. Again, Sonto misunderstood. She'd never seen what she had down there. Mama had always said it was a sin to look at your own body. Presently, static hissed through the night. Sonto was feet away from the panel. She had been pacing her room. "Hello? Hello? Why are you not talking?" her mother said. "If you're tired of our conversation, why not say so?" Sonto was silent. She could hear sounds in the background at the other end. A door slamming, loud whistling. Then her father's shout, "Woman, where are you? Report home." "Your father is back," Mama's voice had dropped to a whisper. Champ croaked in his tank. Her mother went on, "Call Ugo. Call your brother and ask him what I said about the old woman he's seeing." Sonto was before her closet and leaned inside. She found a hand mirror in a drawer. With one hand, she tugged at her undershirts. As it fell and pulled around her ankles, her mother said, "Whatever your brother says, don't you fail to tell me. Make sure." Sonto stood now, legs apart. The mirror reflected a pool of dark curls. She spread wider. The mirror smiled a pink smile. The smile widened into a warm. She spread wider. "I've heard you, Mama, but I will not call you." "Because you want him to waste, is it not? You want that old harlot to—" "I will not call to ask anything," Sonto said. In the background now, Sonto's father was shouting, "Woman, where is my food here?" "Look," Mama's voice was almost inaudible. "Let me serve your father his food. I will call you back tomorrow. Continue." "Cody, Mama." Her mother paused. "You say you will not call your brother and ask him about that woman?" "No, I will not." "Why?" For a moment, static hissed, lying on bed. Sonto's eyes never left the portrait of herself on the handheld mirror. Her image was mashed up, like smudged paint, like a fragmentary half-done project. She turned the mirror this way and that, still holding the phone to her ear. At length, she said into the mouthpiece, and don't stop supporting. Is with a whole, complete, a whole, complete, a whole, complete. She couldn't finish the sentence. She said, till tomorrow, Grandma.
Hi everybody. My plans to use a printer were foiled by that printer, so I am forced to read off of a funnel, and I feel tasteless and I apologize. That said, I have the pleasure of introducing Amanda Corman. Around the beginning of my time here in Charlottesville, on a hot, late summer, post-class afternoon, I remember a group of us fiction kids walking together in our clot of loud fiction camaraderie to the campus bus stop. I remember very early on realizing how quickly I'd come to feel comfortable at UVA with this class of second years who are here to welcome us. Aptly and undoubtedly correctly, just last night Amanda was making the observation that some of our fellow poets, who almost as a rule speak with deliberateness and wise calm, must think that we in the fiction camp are embarrassingly boisterous. I assure you, though, it's all just armature for all of our collective anxieties. Anyhow, on that sunny afternoon, I specifically remember noticing Amanda, who was already outfitted in a shady baseball cap, take the remarkably responsible step of applying a swath of sunscreen to the bridge of her nose. That was odd. Such healthy foresight, such preemptive action, and so distinctly mature. It's funny how a pad of UV protective lotion can summarize a person so succinctly. And I think most people here who know Amanda would agree, as I have since found. Here was essence of Amanda, for a few principal reasons. First, it hinted at Amanda's incredible capacity for sensitivity and care. I suspect that if Amanda could have her way, she'd slather every one of us with sunscreen every time we braved the hot summer streets. Second, it showed the scope of Amanda's vigilance, its constancy, characteristics she takes into her own work, both as a writer and a reader, unwavering, unapologetic, and unwilling to allow injustices to the craft to go unchecked. And third, the act of applying a protective layer to her exterior was representative of how much value Amanda Ward's interiors, which, like the gooey innards she was using the sunscreen to protect, is often the heart and health of fiction. Amanda has demonstrated again and again the unwavering opinion that to understand just why a character deserves a fiction's generosity, one often has to first examine that fiction's darkest places. She cares for the characters in both her work and that of others with an empathy so complete that we can do little more than admire it. When Amanda is responding to what she's read, she's the one in the room we can count on to take a moment, collect herself, and then explain with great eloquence whether she can or cannot believe the behavior of a character on the page. So here and now, Amanda would probably tell me that it's too easy, not to mention cringeworthy, to say on behalf of everybody in workshop, Amanda is a friend and writer of unbelievable character. It is truly an honor to bring up Amanda Corman and her fiction.
Thank you, Slavnik. That was particularly apt because my dad is here. The reason for the sunscreen is a lifetime of dermatological education in our household. So first I want to thank my dad and my mom for being here. It's really special. It's really special to see all of you here. So thank you everyone for coming, and to quadruple repeat the words of my peers, thank you to this whole MFA program for being such an amazing, unbelievable oasis home for us. I just wanted to say a couple things about, I'm going to read the beginning of the story, kind of beginning the first half. I was sort of thinking about, where does it come from, and how can I make it make more sense to you? And we don't often talk about where stories come from, maybe because we're afraid to talk about it, because we respect it by not talking about it. They come from the ether, but in this case, at least partially, the story comes from, I have a very old friend, I'm very fortunate to have a very old friend And she and I still keep in touch and talk all the time. But she and I were old Hebrew school buddies, as it were. And I became less religious, and she became more religious. And that is one of the things that she and I spend a lot of time talking about, and just the daily life, or different daily lives, and kind of finding how much we still have in common. So that is, I think, at least partially a source for this story. I think there's kernels of that in here. So this story is called The Fathoms. Underwater, I opened my eyes. Bubbles moved like abacus beads across the hairs between my legs. "You stayed down there longer than the other women," said the girl watching me from the tile when I emerged. She held out a towel. "It's warm," I said. I dried the abacus hairs first with a slight plie. "Someday you'll see." The girl's eyes flitted at me blankly. Penina Sussman, one of the daughters of the woman who owned the mikvah. "Hopefully someday soon," she said. She wasn't actually a girl anymore. There were breasts underneath that turtleneck. Our voices bounced over the surface of the jacuzzi-sized pool, echoing. I dressed, and she saw me out to the waiting room. "May we not see you for 9 months, Marissa," she said. It was the same stock farewell every month, and yet I had no idea how to respond. She didn't want to hear that I was on birth control, and I didn't want to tell her. I was fairly sure that I needed to at least affect a desire to get pregnant at all times in order to be allowed to come to the Sussman mikvah, which was private, word of mouth only. Amit and I wanted children, but not now, not until he was out of school and I could quit my job. Should have happened by now, shouldn't it? I said to Penina. I sighed for effect. 1.5 years of marriage. Maybe this will be the month, she said. She held the front door open for me and stared, slump-backed, into the darkness of the basement-level stairwell outside. I walked past her and tried to discern from her last look whether my performance had come off or not. Someone who didn't know better might have thought Penina and I were the same type of religious. I had taken to dressing modestly, covering up my knees and elbows and clavicles, but I tried to do so stylishly, unlike Penina, who wore permanently out-of-season long jean skirts and must have brushed out her long brown curls into a triangle of frizz rather than manage them as I did. Never brush a curl, I might have told her, if she and every other young, traditionally orthodox girl like her did not give me the heebie-jeebies with their blank expressions. Their male counterparts were normal and well-socialized. Penina's brothers, for instance, were gregarious and loud when I ran into them around the city, but the girls were socially impenetrable, almost autistic in manner, and I never just ran into them anywhere. Outside, my hair started to ice over. When it got this cold, I usually dried it before leaving, but in order not to end up looking like Penina, I needed my diffuser and hadn't thought to bring it. It was the beginning of November in Washington, D.C., too early to anticipate a freeze. I saw the woman with the pink leather purse almost as soon as I was street level, but by the time I registered where I knew her from, she had seen me. She called out my name and strolled toward me. She was a member of the general council at my office, Lacey or Tracy or Stacy, I couldn't remember. She was tall and zaftig in a way she wore well, as if her extra weight were a beautiful coat. She was also wearing an actual beautiful coat, brown leather, down to her knees. I recognized it from last month's Vogue. "You don't live around here, do you?" she said. I quickly surveyed the new taupe apartments around us. It was a street that had recently been renovated, another conquest of the same trend that would price us all out of the city someday. It was a wonder the Sussman mikvah was still here. "Me?" I said. "No." "Your hair is wet," she said. She hoisted her leather bag high up on her shoulder, possibly so I could see it better. I immediately recognized it. Fendi, a $1,700 purse. My head was full of this stuff. I grabbed at a whole cold, hardened curl as if I wasn't sure what she was talking about. "My gym's around here," I said, since it seemed easier to lie. "What gym?" she said. "In the basement of my building?" She turned and we looked together at the stairs I'd just come up. The Sussman mikvah was behind an unmarked door, one floor below ground, but above it 5 floors of luxury apartments perched, their curtained windows rimmed in gold plate. She had her keyring looped around her index finger. My husband barely knew what happened at the mikvah, and he was the one who wanted me to go there in the first place. It was holy, and it was private, and I preferred to lie rather than explain. "It's a private gym," I said. She was big, but had a regularly sized head. The head of a beautiful, thin woman, which she cocked at me. I started walking away. When I turned around to give her a conciliatory wave, I saw her frozen in a pose of ire. It was clear she was unaccustomed to being denied. I met my husband, Amit Karp, at a Shabbos dinner of a mutual friend. He was well over 6 feet tall, all legs, with narrow, floppy movements, like a fish on a line, but a face like a painting of a face. Smooth, with high, inquisitive cheekbones and 2 small moles on his left jaw. He would not shake my hand, because he was Shomer Negiah, no touching until marriage, a few rungs more religious than I was or ever wanted to be, but we had an easy time together. He thought I was funny and said so, and neither of us was interested in staying single any longer. Plus, he was in optometry school. He could promise me some comfort. We were married within a year. My parents had put me in a Jewish day school so that I would be literate, their word, in my religion, but they were essentially agnostic capitalists and never expected I would have a taste for the lifestyle implied by the school's teachings. Under the marriage chuppah, I could feel in each of their grips on my arm a trembling hesitation. There was nothing they could do. In real Jewish weddings, no one says, "Speak now," or "Forever hold your peace." Because by the time everyone's assembled, the contract has already been signed. It's too late. But as I felt then, and still feel today, what did they know? More than me? Put your daughter in Jewish day school, but then tell her once she's grown that it was all balderdash? There was no wisdom in that, and against their hypocrisy, I went with my gut. This tall, sturdy fish from northern Virginia who believed in every holiday, every ritual, the solidity of whose conviction was to me a bulwark against enemy. Back at our apartment, which was emphatically not luxury, 1 bedroom, a small living room, and a tiny pocket kitchen, I told Amit what happened outside the mikvah because I tried to tell Amit everything. "My sneaky lady," he said, "but why do you need to hide it from her?" He was not upset at my evasion of the woman from my office. Rather, he was elated to find out that I had been to mikvah. By the laws of family purity we went almost 2 weeks every month without sleeping together. And mikvah night was the end of our sex Sabbath, a phrase we used privately, possibly blasphemously. Family purity had been Amit's idea and request. 7 days after the end of my period each month, I submerged myself in the specialized waters of the Sussman mikvah. It was Penina's job to make sure my head went all the way under. In day school, I'd learned that it was more important that a town had a mikvah than a temple, but I'd been a headstrong, touchy kid, and back then the significance of the practice hadn't made it seem any less voyeuristic and gross to me. What finally changed my mind once I grew up and met Amit was the idea that the edict about mikvah attendance is considered one of the unfathomables of Judaism. We obey because God said so. It is beyond the narrow ventricle of our human reason to understand why. I had a vague, gnawing feeling that there was some godlike thing more expansive than the cloistered realm of earth. But what I believed in more strongly was the presence, like a second self, of all I did not know. So I could adhere to a religion broadly that admitted to the unfathomableness of the universe and to a ritual specifically whose enactment was a gesture for that vastly deficient comprehension. "Can't I keep one thing to myself?" I said to Amit. We were sitting on the couch, facing the window that looked out onto a brick wall. The run-in with the woman from work had put me in a bad mood, on top of which I had accidentally used cottage cheese and lasagna instead of ricotta. Again, and we'd eaten it anyway. I should have to explain this too? But Amit, who had always worn a yarmulke and always had the 4 white fringes of his tzitzit emerging from underneath his regular shirts, did not share my discomfort about having strangers know holy things about him. Still, he was patient with me. "Seems to me you cause yourself more angst trying to hide than just saying a little thing that's true. That's all I mean," he said. He was in his ratty gray George Washington University sweatshirt with the hood up since we kept the heat low and he got cold easily. His school books were spread over the dining room table across the room in a way that might have convinced someone who didn't know better that he had actually gotten some studying done. He lifted up my right breast in his palm, and the weight of it disappeared. "So heavy," he said. "I can't believe you carry these around with you every day." "That feels nice," I said. Amit smiled, and the 2 moles on his jaw rose. We stared at each other like we sometimes did. When can I quit my job so I don't have to deal with stuff like this anymore? I said, breaking eye contact. The Lacey, Tracy, Stacys of the world. Amit put down my breast and picked up my hands, kissing them. So soon, he said. 2 years, 1.5. It was an optimistic statement. Reckless, even, and upset me, although no answer to the question I had asked would have pleased me. Amit was in his first semester at Teachers College, and he knew what I was really referring to. Optometry school had not panned out. We were going even further into debt. He walked across the room and sat down at the dining room table, as if he could shrink the amount of school he had left by putting in another 10 minutes of studying now. He balanced one of his expensive textbooks on the table, teaching real-life math skills in middle school, and began to read. He looked up again at the sound of me ripping off the plastic wrapping of the Glamour magazine that had come in the mail for me that day, and gave me his Marissa, I'm working face. Not because he was Mr. Studious, but because he wasn't. Because it was such a fragile state. Because he was eager to blame his general failure at all things school-related on anything but some inherent fact about himself. And I was always right there, right across the width of our tiny apartment. I held up my hands in mock surrender and got comfortable on the couch. Each page of the magazine was its own variety of torture. The clothes, shoes, and jewelry, all stunning eye feasts, brassy metals and saturated colors, an aggravation of the one gigantic, pulsing fact that I did not have any money. My parents had money, and growing up I might have had any of these sweaters or earrings or pumps if my mother saw how cute they made me look. But I did not want to look cute for my parents anymore, and more than anything, I did not want to ask them for help. In less than 5 minutes, Amit scraped his chair back and came over to the edge of the couch. Has anyone ever told you you have ADD? I said. He still had his hood up. The drawstring tightened around his face. He put his hands on the back of my neck, my spot, a confirmation that we'd be having sex any minute. You're my little abuser, you know that? He said, beginning to stroke the tiny hairs there, making me tingle. You think I thought we'd be in this position when I promised to provide for you? He nodded toward our marriage contract, a huge ornate document framed on the wall above the television, the most beautiful thing in the apartment. Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li, it read. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. We were 25. Thank you.
Very soon, we will get to hear Raph read one of his short pieces of fiction. Because of that, I will only briefly comment on his work, as there is no better way to experience a particular writer's fiction other than by hearing or reading it for yourself. However, I will say this. If I know anything about Raph, and after 9 months of workshop, I'd like to think that I do, the story he is about to read will have characters that are on the fringe of their life and in rare form. And there is no doubt we will all walk away wondering what exactly those characters are up to off the page. And as fascinating as this may be, it is only one of many admirable qualities of Raph's work. And it is exciting to speculate on what is to come from him down the road. But for those of us in this room tonight, we will not have to wait so long. And surely we are about to get a good idea of who Raph is as a writer. Though I truly hope that some of you will also have the pleasure to know him in a different context, as all of us in the program do. He is quick to laugh and to tell a lighthearted joke, and also always on the ready to encourage and help anyone out, no matter the circumstance. Perhaps these qualities are the seed of the genuine characters he so often writes about. It is my pleasure to introduce Raph Richardson Carrillo.
See a handful of my students from this year, and it's really nice of you to come, thank you. And I'm sorry I never dressed like this for class. If I had, maybe you would have learned something, but you're a schlub, what can we do about it? Yeah, briefly before I start, every other writing program I applied to said no, we don't want you, stop writing. UVA said yes, and I'm somebody who has had really kind of remarkable good luck my whole life. And even within that scheme, this place has been a true blessing. And yeah, it's just been great. So thank you all for that. And one of the biggest lessons I'm taking away from this program is that of rewriting. And going back to a story, a draft that was already pretty good, or had some pretty good parts to it, and taking the good and being willing to start over, trusting that whatever the feeling was of that original work will survive, maybe even evolve. So sort of based off that principle that I chose what I'm going to read tonight, it's a revision. It's one of two stories that survived from my first year into my thesis. It's a revision. It was pretty much a total overhaul. And I'm going to read about half of it, and if I've chosen my stopping point correctly, you'll all leave here nice and frustrated. It's called The Manor Ones. I had nodded off in the Tyner's yard, the very same yard in which Lucas, their only son, and a classmate of mine, had killed himself. Under a clear black night sky, he lit himself on fire and burned. I watched him do it from my bedroom. We lived at the top of the hill, a long catty-corner angle from the Tyner's. You could run a zip line from my window to the spot where he died. I hadn't told anybody about what I'd seen. A police investigation had confirmed his actions, but that didn't settle anything in my memory. I couldn't recall it, the step-by-step process enacted by a person I used to know. I knew it had happened. I understood it as I understood language or felt hunger. It was something that seemed to have been with me all along. The remaining evidence of his deed was the scorched patch of grass where the gasoline had pooled, surrounded by smaller burns from the incidental drips. It looked like an as-yet undiscovered country with an archipelago abutting it, and the grass grew in thin and half-yellowed. No matter how many times I mowed over their surrounding edges, I couldn't correct the disparity. Really, the Tyners should have resodded the whole thing. But as near as I can figure, people who endure tragedy like that have a tendency to insist on the old way of doing things, at least for a while. It's as if they believe performing the same rituals from before their trauma will persuade time to fold back on itself and reset everything. It's a fool's errand, but you can't talk them out of it. Not that you try. I opened my eyes, and there was a woman above me, her blonde hair glowing in the late sun, which was about to disappear behind the bay, and was reflected in a wide orange strip along the water. The smell of her came down to me, copper tone, and something fruity, like plums. It was Mrs. Tyner, Lucas's mother, Nina. Anthony, she said? Darling? Before Lucas died, Mrs. Tyner had been one of the more visible residents of Douglas Manor, someone who, during the week, taught first grade at PS 98, and on the weekend showed her face at the club, playing tennis and cooling off afterwards with a whiskey sour. Over the past few months, nobody had seen much of her. She'd been on indefinite leave from the school and was becoming someone whose appearance in the aisles of the A&P constituted a worthwhile conversation. Someone about whom, if she did not soon reappear, ready to schmooze and gossip by the bar, people would start to ask, whatever happened. We'd been sleeping together a month and a half, since the beginning of June. Usually, I went inside to her, but on this evening, after cutting the grass, I had waited for her signal, 4 taps on her bedroom window, the one that told me neither her husband nor the housekeeper was there. But it didn't come, and eventually I decided to lie down. I didn't know how long I'd been out. Hi, Nina, I said. The Tyner's house was at the foot of the hill on McDougal Road, and the yard sloped sharply before leveling out. If you cross-sectioned this part of the manor, the shape of it would look something like a hockey stick. Mrs. Tyner wobbled on the slanted ground, and I knew right away she was drunk, and I told her so, my eyes narrow against the fading light. You're drunk, I said. Stoned, she responded. It was unclear if she was correcting me altogether or amending what I had said. I began to get up, and she put the ball of her foot on my chest. She pressed a little. Here, she said. Let's do it right here. She was wearing an airy white blouse and blue and white seersucker shorts cut well above her knees. With her foot on my chest, I could see the underpants she had on. Pink. Even the glimpse of them sparked in me an excitement, an anticipation in my body I'd learned to trust. She and I would be naked soon, exposed to each other. It was going to happen. All of me knew this. Someone will see, I said. I don't care. Nina, I said, you're not thinking. It had never been my intention to go to bed with her, but one day it had happened, and every 4th day after that, when I came back to mow their lawn, it happened again. Her husband worked in Manhattan all day and into the evenings, and on Saturdays, which this was, he sailed up Long Island Sound, often not returning until the next morning. God knows what he was getting up to. I've never told anybody this. Mrs. Tyner was my first lover. She was married, I was 17, and she was the mother of a dead classmate, someone who I'd once been close to. That summer, I was acting on a prolonged impulse, capitalizing on a weakness, or vacancy, and I should have known better. It's easy to say that sort of thing after the fact, but that doesn't change the truth of it. Let's go inside, I said. It's hot out here. There's those hedges, she said, waving a hand toward the street. Those fucking hedges Richard insisted on planting. We can do it sidled up right next to them, and nobody will see. It's too hot, I said. I've been outside all day. This was the summer I mowed the manor lawns. I used Father's old push reel, a beautiful machine, pure function. When the wheels rolled, the cylinder rotated. It worked like a pair of scissors, cutting the grass cleanly, without splitting the blades, and the only maintenance it required was a sharpening and oiling every couple of weeks. I didn't need to fill it with gas. I charged less than the local landscaping companies, and for that summer, I actually had a monopoly on the neighborhood. I waited for Mrs. Tyner to respond, but her eyes were fixed on the hedges, or anyway, she was looking in that direction. She could have been looking at Father's mower, which was standing upright at the edge of the yard, or at the houses of her neighbors across the street, who, she was sure, had a lot to say about her, about how she'd managed to royally screw up her only son, but what the hell did they know? Or at the dried-out patches a few feet from the mower, where Lucas had doused himself in gasoline and burned to death. Or, past all that, to the far end of Little Neck Bay, where it led out into the East River, and where the red lights of the Throgs Neck Bridge had begun to wink. The truth is, I don't know, because I didn't ask, because I didn't want to know. I understood what we were about. We were diligent and focused lovers. There was urgency in the physical relationship we honed, and we were little, if anything, more than that physicality, although from time to time she would try to make it into something else. We'd be lying side by side in her bed, still warm from each other, and she'd offer to make me dinner. Or she'd complain about how distant Richard, her husband, had become, or that she wanted to return to teaching at the school, but the administration wouldn't let her. I'd say no to dinner, listen to her complaints, and then I'd get dressed and leave. I didn't understand much about sex, but I could see how it opened people up and let out all their troubles. And I had a sense that this, what we were doing, had to remain basic, or we'd both be lost forever. I moved her foot off me. I'd sweated through my t-shirt, and the spot where her foot had been resting stuck to my skin. I tugged at the fabric and stood up to watch what remained of the sunset. Too hot, she repeated, as if she didn't believe it. The bay was at high tide and littered with boats. Somewhere in the maze of white masts and sterns was the schooner Father had purchased for our family 2 years before. The idea then had been that we would all go out together, the four of us, all the time. He'd even started sailing lessons for me. But soon thereafter, my younger sister Carly emerged as a junior tennis star, and I began seeing less of everyone. There were always tournaments, camps, practice sessions late at night and early in the morning, and Father even decided to shell out for some media training with a private consultant, just in case Carly attracted anything more than regional attention. The three of them, Father, Mother, Carly, had been gone most of the summer for a series of tournaments across the Midwest, and for weeks I'd been the only one in our house. It was nice, sometimes, to be alone, to not be reminded of my relative plainness as a progeny, but other times I saw the empty house as a hint about my future, an early harbinger of how Mother and Father would forget me, or anyway, the particulars of me. I would always be the first child, the original, but I couldn't help suspecting there was a displacement underway, a shift I could do nothing about. Maybe that could explain what I did that summer. I mean, getting laid twice a week by Mrs. Tyner, but I've never been sure. I took Mrs. Tyner by the elbow and turned her toward the house. She moved as if in water, basically obeying my influence, but with some resistance, a lag. She nearly tipped one way, then the other. I'd seen her drink before, knew she was a lightweight, but I'd never seen her lose any control. "What did you take?" I said. She didn't respond, although a soft noise emanated from her. She was humming a tune I didn't recognize. "Is this going to turn into some kind of emergency?" I said. I was holding her right arm, the one she swung her racket with, and the muscle above the elbow, though out of practice, grew taut between my fingers. "There's no emergency," she said, raising her voice, "and there's no reason to worry, and it's not your job to worry about me, so don't bother, and I can walk just goddamn fine." She pulled her arm away, teetered, and righted herself. The only noise reaching us was the occasional sputter of outboard motors on the bay. Otherwise it was quiet, and Mrs. Tyner's brief loudness sounded like a violence to the air. I followed a step behind her, ready to catch her if she fell, and in the reflection of her living room's bay window, I watched us approach the house. It was that time of day when, if you're inside, you can either turn the lights on or go a little longer without. In New York, they're called blue nights, And it's true, for about 6 minutes, the whole sky briefly occupies the same spot on the electromagnetic spectrum, a flat indigo. From time to time, I still see the image of us approaching our house, 2 blue shadows, although now, in my recollection, I make myself younger than I was. Before correcting the memory, I see a 10 or 11-year-old boy following Mrs. Tyner, and I suppose that's a function of not wanting to take responsibility for my actions during that period. But also, it's to do with certain relationship dynamics being set for life, no matter what happens. I was a head taller than Mrs. Tyner that summer, but once upon a time, she'd stood at the front of my first grade classroom, and with her arms spread wide and her lesson written in large, curvy handwriting on the chalkboard, she seemed enormous, as though she could tell me everything. I should probably say this, Lucas was in that class too. He sat to my left. With a push, then a pull, Mrs. Tyner led us into the kitchen through the screen door. Inside, the air conditioning was on full blast, and goosebumps rose on my skin. She set about turning lights on. Once my eyes adjusted, I saw on the counter a sweaty, mostly empty tumbler and a transparent orange prescription bottle. The bottle was mostly full, so I didn't figure an overdose was likely. Still, she was impaired, loopy. She'd had to feel along the walls for the light switches, and now, standing in her brightened living room, her condition showed in her eyes. They were bloodshot and glazed, and the look coming from them was simply absent. It was as if she were gazing at something a few feet away that nobody else could see. I knew how to touch her, but that wouldn't do much good right now. I scrambled through my mind for something to say. Vicodin, she said, flicking her wrist at the counter. Richard got the prescription after his shoulder surgery. And you drank too, I said, although I knew the answer. She put a hand to her forehead, as if to steady her thinking. Yes, she said. She wobbled again, and I moved quickly to her before she had a chance to fall and hurt herself. I stuck my arms under hers and clasped my hands behind her back, just above her tailbone. Her arms rested on my shoulders, and she let them slide down until her wrists were linked around my neck. We stood there, looking very much the way 2 people who are in love might, only we weren't gazing into each other's eyes, wanting to be there and nowhere else, speculating about this moment stretching into eternity. She was messed up, and I was tending to her, and there was no question at all as to whether this was the way things were supposed to be. I thought, she said, losing the train momentarily, I read somewhere that painkillers make sex better. I thought we'd both take some. It would be something new. She closed her eyes tight, the way a child anticipating something scary does, and rested her cheek on my chest. I felt the rest of her weight shift onto me. I'm going to put you in bed, I said. This is embarrassing, she said. I'm sorry. It's all right, I said. We've just got to get you lying down. I knelt and got my left arm behind her knees. Keep your eyes closed. I scooped her up and held her still a moment so the motion wouldn't make her sick. She was always small in my arms, but felt especially so in light of her shame. She was warm, and beneath the copper tone and the plum-scented perfume, she smelled like she'd been in the sun all day, laid out on a lounger by the pool out back before I got there. It occurred to me, maybe then, maybe later, that it was me she'd been preparing for, maintaining a tan and smelling good all these weeks, swimming laps to stay in shape. I'd like to say it wouldn't have made a difference to me how she looked, that I saw her inner beauty and would have wanted her no matter what, but that would be a lie. She glowed on those summer evenings, dressed in white to highlight the bronzing of her skin, and it was her body I wanted, nothing more. Up to that point in my life, I considered myself a deep, more or less pure person, but she had tapped into something else, some evidence of my truer self that I didn't quite understand or know what to do with. It scared me that an act so basic could echo in other regions of me, and maybe repeating the act that had exposed the truth was the only discernible solution at the time. I don't know. Anyway, up the stairs and to the bedroom. Thank you.
Well, that's why the time goes by so fast. We fall into these worlds and look up, and it's 20 minutes later or 2 months later. So, thank you. One more time for Alex. Thank you. You have only 10 minutes to kill before the bar opens. See you there.